The marble floors of the Harrington Tower penthouse gleamed like mirrors under Sarah Mitchell's knees. She'd been scrubbing the same spot for 3 minutes now, not because it was dirty, but because her phone kept buzzing in her pocket, and she knew exactly who it was. Dinner's in the fridge, working late, again. Sarah sat back on her heels, reading Mark's text for the 3rd time, searching for something, anything, that resembled affection, or even basic acknowledgement. She found neither. 42 years old, and she'd become a ghost in her own life. You missed a spot. Sarah's head jerked up so fast her neck cracked. Standing in the doorway of his home office, bathed in the amber glow of the setting sun through floor-to-ceiling windows, was James Harrington himself. 6 feet 2 inches of sharp jawline, silver-streaked dark hair, and a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. Her heart seized. In 3 years of cleaning his penthouse, she'd never actually encountered him. Mrs. Chen, the building manager, had assured her that Mr. Harrington kept strict hours, 9 to 7 at Harrington Industries headquarters, then evenings at whatever social event required his presence. The penthouse was simply where he slept. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington, Sarah stammered, scrambling to her feet and nearly knocking over her bucket of cleaning supplies. Soapy water sloshed onto the pristine floor she'd just finished. I didn't know you were home. I can come back tomorrow. I was joking. His voice was surprisingly warm, with a hint of amusement that crinkled the corners of his grey eyes. About the spot. The floors look perfect. They always do. Sarah blinked. You've noticed? I live here, don't I? He loosened his tie with one hand, the gesture somehow both casual and elegant. You're Sarah, right? Sarah Mitchell? She nodded, stunned that he knew her name. You've been cleaning my place for, 3 years now? 3.5, she whispered. James walked further into the living room, his Italian leather shoes silent on the floor she'd just been scrubbing. He paused at the bar cart, which Sarah had meticulously organized by spirit type and bottle height, and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Can I ask you something, Sarah? He didn't wait for her answer. Why are you crying? Sarah's hand flew to her face. She hadn't even realized tears were streaming down her cheeks. Mortification burned through her body like wildfire. I wasn't. She grabbed the cleaning cloth from her cart and furiously wiped her face, smearing makeup and probably making herself look even worse. Personal issue. It won't happen again. I should go. Stop. The command in his voice froze her mid-turn, then softer. Please sit down. Mr. Harrington, I really shouldn't. James. And you've been on your knees scrubbing my floors for the past 2 hours. Sit. He gestured to the leather sofa that Sarah had conditioned just yesterday. When she hesitated, he added, That's not a request from an employer. That's a request from one human being to another. Slowly, feeling like she was violating some unspoken rule of the universe, Sarah perched on the edge of the $10,000 sofa. She kept her cleaning cart between them like a shield. James sat in the armchair opposite her, loosening his tie completely and undoing his top button. The gesture made him look less like a CEO and more like a man, tired, maybe a little lonely. Bad day? He asked. Sarah let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Bad 15 years. She hadn't meant to say that. The words just tumbled out, pulled by the strange gravity of this surreal moment. Here she was, sitting in a penthouse worth $20 million, talking to a man whose net worth Forbes estimated at $3.7 billion. And somehow, it felt like the most honest conversation she'd had in months, maybe years. Want to talk about it? James took a sip of his scotch, watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. You don't want to hear about my problems. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. Sarah studied his face, searching for condescension or pity or the polite disinterest she'd grown so accustomed to. She found only genuine curiosity. My husband forgot our anniversary, she heard herself say. 3 weeks ago, and our daughter's birthday last month. He forgot to pick her up from soccer practice twice this week. He works 80 hours a week at a job he hates, comes home exhausted, eats whatever I've left for him in the fridge, and falls asleep watching ESPN. We haven't had a real conversation in, I can't even remember, 6 months, a year. The words kept coming, a dam breaking after holding back too much pressure for too long. I clean houses for a living. 12 different apartments in this building alone, plus 8 townhouses in Brooklyn. I'm good at it, really good. And you know what the worst part is? My own husband doesn't even notice. Our apartment could be buried in trash and he wouldn't see it. I'm invisible to him. I'm invisible to everyone. Sarah clamped her mouth shut, horrified at the verbal diarrhea she'd just unleashed on this stranger. This billionaire stranger who definitely had better things to do than listen to the marital problems of his cleaning lady. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "That was completely inappropriate. You're not invisible to me." The quiet certainty in James's voice stopped her again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, Scotch glass dangling from his fingers. "I notice things, Sarah. I notice that you organize my books by color because you know I'm slightly colorblind, and it helps me find things faster. I notice that you always leave the bedroom windows cracked exactly 3 inches because you figured out that's the perfect amount of airflow for the temperature I keep the penthouse. I notice that on Thursdays you put a fresh orchid on my dining table because you know Thursday's the one night I actually eat dinner at home." Sarah's throat tightened. She'd done all those things, never imagining anyone paid attention. "I notice," James continued, his grey eyes locked on hers, "that someone who's supposedly invisible has spent 3.5 years making my life infinitely more comfortable without ever asking for recognition or thanks. So let me be clear, you are not invisible, at least not to me." For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, thick with something Sarah couldn't quite name. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it was intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. Finally, James cleared his throat and stood, walking to the windows that overlooked Central Park. The sun had set completely now, and the city sparkled below like a jewelry box. "I have a proposition for you," he said to the window, "and I want you to really think about it before you answer." Sarah's heart hammered. "Okay. My previous housekeeper, Margot, retired last month to be with her grandchildren in Florida. I've been trying to find a replacement through the usual channels. Agencies, references, interviews. Everyone they send is competent, but—" He paused, searching for words. "They treat this place like a job." "Margot treated it like a home. You treat it like a home." He turned to face her, backlit by the city lights. "I want to offer you a full-time position. Live-in housekeeper. The guest suite would be yours. Fully furnished, private bathroom, separate entrance if you want privacy. Salary of $150,000 per year, plus full health benefits, retirement plan, and 3 weeks paid vacation. Your responsibilities would be managing the household, preparing meals when I'm home, and generally keeping things running smoothly." Sarah's mind reeled. $150,000. That was more than quadruple what she made now, scraping by with her patchwork of cleaning jobs. I'm married," she stammered. "I know, and I'm not asking you to leave your husband." James's expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm offering you a job. What you do with your personal life is entirely your business. But Sarah, I've watched you work for 3 years. You're meticulous, trustworthy, and you care about things most people don't notice. Those qualities are rare. I'd like to compensate them fairly." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why me? You could hire anyone, someone with actual credentials, professional training. Because credentials don't teach someone how to turn a house into a home. Experience does. Heart does." He set down his empty Scotch glass. "And because about 6 months ago you left a note on my desk that said, 'Hope whatever's troubling you gets better soon,' after I'd had the worst week of my professional life. You had no way of knowing that. You just noticed." Sarah remembered. She'd found several whiskey glasses in the sink, unusual for James, who rarely drank at home. The trash had been full of crumpled papers covered in angry handwriting. She'd cleaned everything up and left the note on an impulse, never expecting him to see it. But he had. He'd noticed. "Think about it," James said gently. "No pressure. If you say no, nothing changes. You can keep cleaning here twice a week like always. But if you say yes—" He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger, less guarded. "Well, you'd be doing me a tremendous favor, and you'd have your own space, a place where someone sees you, really sees you." Sarah's phone buzzed again. She didn't need to look to know it was Mark, probably asking if she'd picked up his dry cleaning. Another task, another obligation, another way she existed only to serve. "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need. I'll have my attorney draw up a formal contract with all the details. No obligation." James walked toward his office, then paused in the doorway. "And Sarah, for what it's worth, I think you deserve to be seen, by everyone, not just me." After he disappeared into his office, Sarah sat on the $10,000 sofa for another 20 minutes, her mind spinning through possibilities and impossibilities. $150,000. Her own apartment, in a building where each square foot was worth more than her current yearly income. A job where someone valued her work, noticed her efforts, saw her as a person and not just a pair of hands that cleaned and cooked and organized. But what would Mark say? What would her daughter Emma think? More importantly, and this question terrified her most, what did she want? For 15 years, Sarah Mitchell had been invisible. A ghost moving through other people's lives, making things better while slowly disappearing from her own story. Maybe it was time to be seen. Maybe it was time to take up space. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to find out who Sarah Mitchell actually was, underneath all the years of being ignored. Her phone buzzed again. Sarah turned it off, stood up, and began pushing her cleaning cart toward the service elevator. But before she left, she did something she'd never done before. She walked to James's office door, slightly ajar, and knocked gently. "Yes?" His voice drifted out. "Mr. Harrington, James, I don't need time to think about it." Sarah's voice shook, but she kept going. "My answer is yes. I'd like to accept your offer." Silence. Then James appeared in the doorway, surprise and something else, relief, flickering across his features. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "But yes, I'm sure." James extended his hand. Sarah hesitated only a moment before shaking it. His grip was warm, firm, and when her palm touched his, she felt something shift, not romantic, not yet, but significant. A door opening, a story beginning. "Welcome home, Sarah," James said with that transformative smile. "Officially, this time." As Sarah rode the service elevator down to the lobby, her mind raced with everything she'd need to do. Tell Mark, pack her things, explain to Emma, navigate this enormous change that both thrilled and terrified her. But underneath the anxiety, underneath the practical concerns and the what-ifs, something else bloomed. Hope. For the first time in 15 years, Sarah Mitchell felt visible. And it was only the beginning. The conversation with Mark went exactly as badly as Sarah had expected. "You're doing what?" He didn't even look up from his laptop, sitting at their cramped kitchen table surrounded by papers from his accounting firm. The blue light from the screen made his face look skeletal, unfamiliar. "I'm taking a live-in position," Sarah repeated, keeping her voice steady. "It's a significant salary increase, $150,000 per year, Mark. That's more than we make combined right now." That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Live-in? As in, you'd be living somewhere else?" "The guest suite at the Harrington Tower penthouse. I'd still visit regularly, obviously. I'd come home on weekends, or you and Emma could visit." "Visit?" And Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum. "Sarah, we're married. You can't just move out because some rich guy offered you more money. What would people think?" Sarah's hands clenched around the edge of the counter. When was the last time you cared what I thought, Mark? Not what people think, what I think. That's not fair. You forgot our anniversary. You forgot Emma's birthday. You haven't asked me about my day in 6 months. When was the last time you actually looked at me? Her voice cracked, all the pain she'd been swallowing for years finally surfacing. I could disappear tomorrow, and you probably wouldn't notice for a week. Mark's face reddened. I'm working 80 hours a week to keep this family afloat. And I'm working 70, cleaning other people's houses because your salary barely covers our rent. This is an opportunity, Mark, for both of us. With this salary, you could cut back your hours. We could actually save money, maybe even buy a real apartment instead of renting this shoebox. It's not about the money. But his tone suggested otherwise. Mark ran his hand through his thinning hair, a gesture Sarah recognized as his thinking tell. Who is this guy? What does he want from you? His name is James Harrington. He owns Harrington Industries, and he wants a competent housekeeper who actually cares about doing good work. Right, a billionaire needs a married woman to live with him. That doesn't sound suspicious at all. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah felt something inside her snap. You know what, Mark? If you'd paid any attention to me in the last 5 years, you might have earned the right to be jealous. But you don't get to ignore me 364 days a year and then suddenly play the concerned husband when I actually do something for myself. She grabbed her purse from the counter. I'm taking this job. I'm moving in on Saturday. You can support me or not, but I'm done being invisible in my own marriage. Sarah walked out of the apartment, leaving Mark standing in the kitchen, his mouth open in shock. It was the first time she'd ever had the last word in an argument. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Emma took it better than expected. At 19, home from NYU for spring break, Sarah's daughter had inherited her mother's practical nature and her father's analytical mind. They met at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, neutral territory away from the tension of the apartment. So you're basically becoming a billionaire's live-in maid, Emma said, stirring her oat milk latte. Mum, that's either really smart or the beginning of a true crime podcast. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. I'm hoping for the former. How much is he paying you? 150,000. Emma whistled low. Okay, that's not maid money. That's executive assistant money. What's the catch? No catch. Just managing his household, preparing meals when he's home, keeping things organized. And he's not creepy? Not inappropriate? Sarah thought about James. His careful distance, his genuine warmth, the way he'd offered her the job without a hint of ulterior motive. No. Actually, he's been nothing but respectful. Emma studied her mother with those sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. You know what I think? I think this isn't really about the money. Of course it is, Mom. Boom! Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. I'm 19, not stupid. I've watched you and Dad basically become roommates. I've seen you work yourself to exhaustion for years while he barely notices you exist. If this job gives you some space to figure out what you actually want, then good. You deserve that. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Emma squeezed her hand. Just promise me something. Don't lose yourself trying to please someone else. Not Dad, not this Harrington guy, not anyone. Figure out who Sarah Mitchell is when she's not cleaning up everyone else's messes. I promise. And Mom, Emma grinned. If this billionaire does turn out to be a creep, I know 3 different martial arts, and my roommate's dad is a lawyer. Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. At least she had one person in her corner. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in the kind of crisp April sunshine that made New York City feel like the center of the universe. Sarah stood in the Harrington Tower lobby with 2 suitcases, a box of personal items, and a stomach full of butterflies. The doorman, Thomas, who'd always been kind to her, smiled warmly. Heard you're moving up in the world, Miss Sarah. Penthouse suite. Guest suite, Sarah corrected, though her cheeks flushed. Still counts as up. Thomas winked and pressed the elevator button for her. Mr. Harrington's a good man, tough but fair. You'll do well there. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt simultaneously too fast and endless. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Sarah's breath caught. She'd cleaned this space hundreds of times, but walking in as a resident rather than staff felt completely different. The morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the whole apartment glow like something from an architectural magazine. "Sarah, perfect timing." James emerged from the kitchen, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal Henley. The most casual she'd ever seen him. It made him look younger, less intimidating. His silver-streaked hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. "I made coffee," he continued, seeming almost nervous. "Or tea, if you prefer. I wasn't sure what you liked." I realized I should have asked before. "Coffee's perfect," Sarah said, touched by his uncertainty. It was oddly humanizing, seeing James Harrington flustered. He helped her carry her suitcases down the hall to the guest suite. When he opened the door, Sarah gasped. The room was enormous, at least 400 square feet, larger than her and Mark's entire bedroom at home. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in what looked like Egyptian cotton, in soft cream tones. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking Central Park. The ensuite bathroom featured heated marble floors, a rainfall shower, and a soaking tub that could easily fit 2 people. "If anything isn't to your liking, just let me know," James said, setting down her suitcases. "Mrs. Chen helped me furnish it, but it's your space. Change whatever you want." "James, this is—" Sarah turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "This is incredible. It's too much. It's appropriate compensation for your work." But his smile suggested he was pleased by her reaction. "The closet is walk-in, fully cedar-lined. There's a mini-fridge stocked with basics, though obviously you have full access to the main kitchen. The balcony gets morning sun, perfect for coffee, and the lock is keyed to you, complete privacy whenever you want it." He pointed to a tablet mounted near the door. "This controls everything. Lights, temperature, window shades, even the music system. I had the building's tech person program it this morning. If you have any questions, I'm just down the hall." Sarah walked to the French doors and opened them, stepping onto the balcony. The park stretched below like an emerald carpet, joggers and cyclists already enjoying the spring weather. She could see the reservoir sparkling in the distance. "I've cleaned this apartment 347 times, she said softly. "I've scrubbed every floor, dusted every surface, organized every closet, but I've never really looked at it before. Not like this." James joined her on the balcony, maintaining a respectful distance. "How does it look?" "Like a home," Sarah said. "A really, really expensive home, but still, a home." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the city wake up below them. Then James cleared his throat. "I thought we should establish some ground rules," he said. "Make sure we're both comfortable with the arrangement." "Okay. First, your time off. I'd like you to take every Sunday completely free, plus 1 weekday of your choice each week. No cleaning, no cooking, nothing. Your time." Sarah blinked. "That's generous." "Second, I travel frequently for business. When I'm gone, which is roughly 40% of the time, the apartment is yours. Have friends over, order takeout, blast music at 2 in the morning, I don't care. It's your home too now. I don't blast music at 2 in the morning. The point stands." James smiled. "Third, and this is important, I don't expect you to be available 24/7. When your door is closed, you're off duty, period. I'm perfectly capable of making my own sandwich or answering my own door. Now, what if there's an emergency? Then I'll knock and ask for help. But Sarah, I'm hiring you to make my life easier, not to be my servant. There's a difference." Sarah studied his profile, the strong nose, the laugh lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was 48, she knew from the background research she'd guiltily Googled. Divorced for 6 years. No children. Built a tech company from nothing and sold it for $2 billion before starting Harrington Industries, a venture capital firm that specialized in sustainable energy. He was also looking at her with an openness that made her stomach flip. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this, for seeing me. Thank you for being willing to be seen." James checked his watch. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes, but after that, how about I show you how everything works? The espresso machine is Italian and temperamental. The oven has more settings than a spaceship, and the media system requires a master's degree to operate." Sarah laughed. "I've been cleaning around these appliances for years. I think I can figure them out." A pride before the fall, Sarah Mitchell. That espresso machine has made 3 grown men cry. Challenge accepted. By evening, Sarah had unpacked her belongings, learned the quirks of every appliance in the kitchen, and prepared her first dinner as official housekeeper: pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables and a lemon butter sauce. James appeared in the kitchen at exactly 7 o'clock, drawn by the smell. "Is that what I think it is?" He looked at the perfectly plated meal like she'd performed magic. "Dinner. You mentioned you usually eat at home on Thursdays. I thought I'd start establishing a routine." James sat at the dining table, the same one where Sarah had been leaving fresh orchids for 3 years, and took his first bite. His eyes closed in evident pleasure. "This is incredible," he said after swallowing. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "YouTube mostly, and trial and error." Sarah hovered uncertainly by the kitchen island. "I should let you eat in peace." "Sarah, sit down." "I'm working." "You're also a person who just cooked an amazing meal. Sit. Eat with me." When she hesitated, he added, "Please. I've eaten alone in this apartment for 6 years. The novelty has worn off." Slowly, Sarah fixed herself a plate and sat across from him. It felt strange, intimate, like crossing some invisible line between employer and employee. "Tell me about your daughter," James said. "Emma, right?" Sarah's eyebrows rose. "You know her name? You keep a photo of her in your cleaning cart. I notice things, remember?" So Sarah told him about Emma, her sharp wit, her passion for environmental law, her tendency to call Sarah out when she was being too passive. James listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at the funny stories. "She sounds remarkable," he said. "Like her mother." Sarah's cheeks heated. "I'm not remarkable. You're sitting in a penthouse worth $20 million, eating dinner you prepared in a kitchen that most professional chefs would kill for, after negotiating a salary 4 times your previous income. That sounds pretty remarkable to me." "I didn't negotiate anything. You offered, and you said yes. Do you know how rare that is? Most people would have spent weeks agonizing, making lists, asking everyone's opinion. You trusted your instinct." James set down his fork, his grey eyes serious. "That takes courage, Sarah. Especially when your instinct tells you to do something that everyone else might not understand. My husband thinks I'm crazy. What do you think?" Sarah considered the question, really considered it. "I think I've spent 15 years being what everyone else needed me to be. Maybe it's time to find out who I am when I'm not invisible." "To being visible." James raised his water glass in a toast. Sarah clinked her glass against his. "To being visible." As they finished dinner, talking about everything from politics to favorite books to the best pizza in New York, Sarah realized something astonishing. She was happy, not content, not satisfied, actually happy. The kind of fizzy, excited happiness she'd forgotten existed. And judging by the way James smiled at her across the candlelit table, by the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when she made him laugh, by the way he listened to her like every word mattered, he was happy too. Later, alone in her beautiful guest suite, with its Central Park view and Egyptian cotton sheets, Sarah lay in bed and tried to process the seismic shift her life had taken in just 1 week. She'd left her husband. Not officially, not permanently, but she'd left. She'd moved into a billionaire's penthouse. She'd eaten dinner with a man who saw her, really saw her, for the first time in years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Can we talk?" Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone aside without answering. Tomorrow, she'd deal with Mark, and all the complicated feelings attached to their failing marriage. Tonight, she was going to enjoy feeling visible. Through the wall, she heard the faint sound of piano music. Chopin, she thought, though she wasn't sure. James must be in his study, working late as usual. Sarah closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling like a character in someone else's life. A life where she mattered, a life where she was seen, a life that was just beginning. 3 weeks into her new position, Sarah had learned several important things about James Harrington. 1. He was a night owl who did his best work between 10 in the evening and 2 in the morning, fueled by espresso and classical music. 2. He had exactly 7 suits in rotation, all custom-tailored, all in shades of charcoal, navy, or black, and he was superstitious about which one he wore on important meeting days. 3. Despite being worth billions, he ate peanut butter straight from the jar at midnight when he thought no one was watching. 4. He was desperately, achingly lonely. Sarah discovered this last fact gradually, in small moments. The way his face lit up when he came home and found her in the kitchen. The way he'd invent excuses to linger over breakfast, asking her opinion on everything from market trends to whether his new assistant seemed competent. The way he'd started timing his late-night work sessions to coincide with her evening routine, so they'd accidentally run into each other in the kitchen. It should have been awkward, employer and employee dancing around each other in an expensive apartment. But somehow it wasn't. Somehow it felt natural. "You're thinking too loud," James said from his position at the kitchen island, making Sarah jump. She'd been loading the dishwasher after dinner, lost in thought. "Sorry, wait. How can someone think too loud?" "Your forehead gets this tiny crease right here." He tapped the space between his own eyebrows. "And you start moving slower, like your brain is using all your processing power. What's on your mind?" Sarah closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, exposing surprisingly muscular forearms. She'd been noticing details like that lately, much to her own confusion. "Mark wants me to come home," she admitted. "Not to visit, to move back permanently." James's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his grey eyes. "What did you tell him?" "I haven't responded yet." Sarah leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "He sent flowers to the apartment. Called my phone 17 times yesterday. Showed up at the building last night, but Thomas didn't let him up. Thomas takes his job seriously. Mark thinks I'm having an affair." The words tumbled out before Sarah could stop them. "With you. He actually accused me of leaving him for a richer man." The silence that followed felt heavy, charged with something Sarah couldn't quite name. "Are you?" James asked quietly. "Having an affair?" "No!" Sarah's cheeks burned. "Of course not. You've never. This is purely professional." "Right. Professional." James stood abruptly, walking to the windows that overlooked the city. His reflection in the glass looked troubled. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." Her heart hammered. "Okay. Do you feel uncomfortable here, with this arrangement? Because if you do, if there's any part of this that makes you uneasy, I'll help you find another position, somewhere else. I'll write you the best reference letter anyone's ever—" "James, stop." Sarah crossed the kitchen to stand beside him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm not uncomfortable. This is the first time in 15 years I've felt like myself, like I matter, like I'm more than just hands that clean and cook and organize." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You've always been more than that." The moment stretched between them like taffy, sweet and dangerous. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears. James was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar-scented, and see the silver threading through his dark hair. This was her boss, her employer. She was a married woman, even if that marriage was circling the drain. "I should go," she whispered. "It's late." "Sarah." But she was already backing toward the hallway, her heart racing like she'd run a marathon. "Good night, James." She practically fled to her suite, closing the door and leaning against it like she could physically hold back whatever was building between them. The next morning, Sarah woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note on James's personal stationery. "Sarah, I apologize if I made you uncomfortable last night. That was never my intention. You're right. This is a professional arrangement, and I should maintain appropriate boundaries. I value your presence here more than I can adequately express, but not at the cost of your peace of mind. If you'd prefer, I can arrange to take more business trips, give you more space. Please let me know what would make you most comfortable." Sarah read the note 3 times, emotions warring in her chest. Relief that James was being respectful, disappointment that he was pulling away, confusion about why she felt disappointed at all. She was married. Unhappily married, yes, but still married. And James was her employer, a man who'd shown her incredible kindness, but who lived in a completely different world. This couldn't go anywhere. She shouldn't want it to go anywhere. But lying in bed at 7 in the morning, reading his careful handwriting, Sarah had to admit an uncomfortable truth. She was developing feelings for James Harrington. Real feelings. Feelings that had nothing to do with his money or his penthouse or the opportunities he'd given her, and everything to do with the way he listened when she talked, the way he remembered small details about her life, the way he looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. Her phone buzzed. "Mark again. Sarah, please, we need to talk. I miss you." Sarah stared at the text, then at James's note, feeling like she was standing at a crossroads with no map. She'd been invisible for so long. Being seen felt like standing in sunlight after years in shadow, wonderful and terrifying and potentially dangerous. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. That afternoon, Sarah did something she hadn't done in months. She called her best friend Rachel. They met at a wine bar in Soho, one of those trendy places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Rachel, a corporate lawyer with a no-nonsense attitude and killer instincts, took one look at Sarah's face and ordered an entire bottle of Pinot Grigio. "Okay, spill," Rachel demanded once they were settled in a corner booth. "You look like you're either about to commit murder or fall in love, possibly both." "I think I'm developing feelings for my boss." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "The billionaire? The one whose penthouse you're living in? It sounds worse when you say it like that." "Sarah, honey, it sounds exactly as complicated as it actually is." Rachel poured them both generous glasses of wine. "Tell me everything, and I mean everything." So Sarah did. She told Rachel about the job offer, the move, the growing comfort between her and James, the late-night conversations, the way he looked at her, the note he'd slipped under her door that morning. "And I know it's crazy," Sarah finished, downing half her wine. "I'm married. He's my employer. There's a massive power imbalance. It's a terrible idea on every possible level. Okay, first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. You and Mark." Rachel leaned forward, her brown eyes serious. "When was the last time he made you feel the way you just described feeling around James?" Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. "I don't remember." "Exactly. Sarah, I've watched you and Mark for 15 years. You've been roommates playing house for at least 5 of those years, maybe longer. The question isn't whether you should feel guilty about developing feelings for someone else. The question is why you stayed in a marriage where you were invisible for so long. Because that's what you do. You commit. You work through problems. Working through problems requires 2 people willing to work. Has Mark been willing?" When Sarah didn't answer, Rachel continued gently. "You can't be the only person fighting for a marriage. That's not commitment. That's self-sacrifice." Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I don't know what to do." "Well, here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to make any major decisions while you're emotionally confused. And you're definitely not going to sleep with your billionaire boss without figuring out your marriage situation first. I'm not going to sleep with James. Not yet, maybe. But Sarah, I know that look. You're falling for him. The question is what you're going to do about it. Sarah came home, and when had she started thinking of the penthouse as home? To find James in the kitchen, attempting to cook. The scene was almost comical. He stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned, staring at a pan of what might have once been chicken with an expression of deep betrayal. "I think I killed it," he said without turning around. "Is that possible? Can you murder something that's already dead?" Despite everything, Sarah laughed. "What are you trying to make?" "Chicken piccata. I watched 3 YouTube videos, followed the recipe exactly, and somehow—" He gestured helplessly at the pan, where blackened pieces of chicken sat in a puddle of suspicious liquid. "This happened." Sarah moved beside him, assessing the damage. "Did you pound the chicken flat? Was I supposed to do that?" "James, it was in the recipe." "I thought that was optional. Who reads every single step? People who don't want to commit poultry murder." Sarah couldn't help smiling at his utterly baffled expression. "Why are you cooking anyway? That's literally my job." "I wanted to surprise you. You've been cooking for me every night for 3 weeks. I thought—" He ran his hand through his hair, leaving it adorably mussed. "I wanted to do something nice, return the favor, but apparently I have the cooking skills of a concussed raccoon." The image was so absurd that Sarah burst out laughing, real, genuine laughter that came from somewhere deep in her chest. James stared at her for a moment, then started laughing too. "A concussed raccoon," she managed between giggles. "I'm being generous to myself. The raccoon would probably do better." They stood in the kitchen, laughing over burned chicken, and Sarah realized this was the happiest she'd felt in years. Not because of the penthouse or the money or any of the material things. Because of him. Because James Harrington, billionaire CEO, had tried to cook a dinner and failed spectacularly. And somehow that meant more than any grand gesture could have. "Come on," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "I'll teach you. We'll start with something simple." "Simpler than chicken piccata?" "Much simpler. We're going to make grilled cheese." For the next hour, Sarah walked James through the basics of cooking. How to butter bread evenly, how to know when the pan was the right temperature, how to flip without creating a cheese explosion. He was a terrible student, impatient, easily distracted, prone to asking philosophical questions about why cheese melted. But he was also earnest and funny and genuinely trying to learn. "I don't understand how you make this look easy," he complained, watching his 3rd attempt at a grilled cheese burn slightly around the edges. "You move around the kitchen like you're conducting an orchestra. Practice. Same way you got good at running a billion-dollar company. I'm not sure those skills are comparable." "Sure they are. Both require timing, patience, and the ability to adjust when something isn't working." Sarah handed him a spatula. "Try again. 4th time's the charm." This time James managed to produce a perfectly golden grilled cheese sandwich. He held it up like a trophy, grinning with such genuine pride that Sarah's heart squeezed. "I made food," he announced. "Actual, edible food. You made grilled cheese. Don't get cocky." They ate their sandwiches standing at the kitchen island, and somewhere between discussing the optimal cheese-to-bread ratio and debating whether tomato soup was mandatory or optional, Sarah felt the careful walls she'd been building start to crumble. This wasn't just attraction. This wasn't just gratitude for a good job or appreciation for being seen. This was something deeper, something real, something terrifying. "Sarah," James said softly, setting down his half-eaten sandwich, "about last night. We don't have to talk about it." "I think we do." He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes serious. "I need you to understand something. I didn't offer you this job because I was interested in you romantically. I offered it because you're exceptional at what you do, and I genuinely needed help. I know. But," he continued, "I'd be lying if I said my feelings haven't evolved over these past 3 weeks, and I need to know if that's a problem, because if it is, we address it now. We establish clearer boundaries. I take more trips. Whatever you need to feel comfortable." Sarah's heart hammered. "What if I don't want clearer boundaries?" The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. James's expression shifted. Surprise, hope, and something darker flickering across his features. "Sarah, you're married." "Barely. Mark and I have been strangers for years." "That doesn't mean—" He stopped, clearly struggling. "I don't want to be the reason your marriage falls apart. I don't want you to have regrets. What if my biggest regret is spending 15 years invisible? What if I'm tired of playing it safe?" She was standing so close to him now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. One of his hands came up, hesitating near her face before gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent electricity down her spine. "I'm not going to kiss you," James said, his voice rough. "Not while you're still married, not while this is still complicated." "What if I kiss you? Then I'd be a better man than I am if I could resist." They stood frozen in that moment, balanced on a knife's edge, between everything safe and familiar and everything dangerous and new. Finally, Sarah stepped back, breaking the spell. "You're right," she whispered. "This is complicated. I need to figure out my situation with Mark. Really figure it out, not just avoid it. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." But as Sarah retreated to her suite that night, her lips still tingling with the ghost of a kiss that never happened, she knew the truth. Time wouldn't make this less complicated. Time would only make her feelings stronger. And eventually she'd have to choose between the safe, invisible life she'd known for 15 years and the terrifying possibility of being truly seen, even if being seen meant risking everything. Sarah stood outside her old apartment building in Queens, staring at the chipped green door she'd walked through 1,000 times. The building looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier, like returning to a childhood home and realizing it had shrunk in your absence. She'd been avoiding this conversation for 3 weeks. But Rachel was right. She couldn't move forward without addressing the past. Taking a deep breath, Sarah climbed the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 4B. Her key still fit the lock, which felt both familiar and strange. Inside, the apartment looked exactly as she'd left it. Beige walls, sagging couch, the coffee table covered in Mark's work papers. The smell of stale takeout hung in the air. Mark emerged from the bedroom, and Sarah's breath caught. He looked terrible. Hair uncombed, wearing the same wrinkled button-down he'd probably slept in, dark circles under his eyes. "Sarah!" His voice cracked on her name. "You came. You said we needed to talk." "Right, yes. Talk." Mark ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd seen 1,000,000 times. "Do you want coffee? I made a fresh pot. Well, freshish, maybe an hour ago." "I'm fine, Mark." They stood in the living room like strangers, the weight of 15 years of marriage pressing down between them. "You look good," Mark said finally. "Different. Your hair. Did you do something with your hair?" Sarah touched her newly trimmed layers, self-consciously. James had mentioned offhandedly that there was an excellent salon in the building, and she'd treated herself for the first time in years. "Just a trim. It suits you." Mark gestured to the couch. "Please, sit." Sarah perched on the edge of the cushion, every muscle tense. Mark sat in his usual spot, the worn patch on the right side that had molded to his shape over the years. "I've been thinking," he started, "about what you said, about me not noticing you, not appreciating you." He looked down at his hands. "You were right. I took you for granted." "Mark, let me finish, please." He took a shaky breath. "I got so caught up in work, in trying to provide, that I forgot we were supposed to be partners. I forgot that you needed more than just a paycheck and a roof over your head. I forgot," his voice broke. "I forgot to love you the way you deserve to be loved." Sarah's throat tightened. This was the conversation she'd wanted for years, Mark actually seeing her, acknowledging her pain. So why did it feel like too little, too late? "I want to try again," Mark continued, reaching for her hand. She let him take it, feeling the familiar calluses on his palm. "Real, trying, couples therapy, date nights. I'll cut back my hours at the firm. We'll take that trip to Paris you always wanted. I'll be better, Sarah. I promise I'll be better." "Mark," she pulled her hand away gently. "Why now? Why does it take me leaving for you to suddenly want to work on our marriage?" Because I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Is that so wrong? People make mistakes. People wake up." "I'm waking up, Sarah. Please tell me it's not too late." Sarah stood, moving to the window that overlooked the busy street below. A bodega, a laundromat, a family arguing in Spanish outside the corner store. This had been her life, comfortable, familiar, small. "Tell me something," she said without turning around. "When's my birthday?" Silence. "Mark, when is my birthday?" "August 20th?" His voice was uncertain. "23rd. We've been married for 15 years, and you don't know when my birthday is." Sarah turned to face him. "What's my favorite book?" Sarah, this isn't fair. What's my favorite color? What did I want to be when I was younger? What keeps me up at night? What makes me laugh?" Her voice rose with each question. "You don't know any of these things because you've never asked. Not in years. Maybe not ever. I know you." Mark stood defensive now. "I know you're kind and patient, and you take your coffee with cream and 2 sugars. Those are habits, Mark, not me, not who I actually am." Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Do you know what the saddest part is? I don't think you ever really saw me. Even in the beginning when we were supposedly in love, I think you saw someone convenient. Someone who would take care of you, support you, make your life easier. That's not true, isn't it?" She moved closer, needing him to really hear her. "When did you fall in love with me, Mark? What moment? What quality? What thing about Sarah Mitchell made you think, that's the woman I want to spend my life with?" Mark's mouth opened and closed. We were compatible. We had the same goals. Compatible." Sarah laughed, but it came out bitter. "We were compatible, like matching socks. That's the foundation of our marriage. Sarah, you're twisting everything. I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years." The words exploded out of her. "I've spent 15 years being your maid, your cook, your secretary. I've organized your life, supported your career, made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient so you could be comfortable. And you know what? You still didn't see me. You still don't see me." "And he does." Mark's voice turned sharp, bitter. "Your billionaire boss? Is that what this is about? You're throwing away our marriage for some rich guy who's probably just using you? This isn't about James, isn't it?" Mark stepped closer, anger finally surfacing. "You move into his penthouse, you change your hair, you suddenly grow a spine. 3 weeks with him and you're a different person. Maybe I'm just myself for the first time in years. Or maybe you're deluding yourself. You think a guy like that actually cares about you. You think you're special to him?" Mark's words were cruel now, designed to wound. "You're the help, Sarah. That's all you'll ever be to someone like James Harrington. The second a younger, prettier housekeeper comes along..." The slap echoed through the apartment. Sarah stared at her hand, shocked that she'd actually struck him. Mark stood frozen, one hand on his reddening cheek. "Get out," she whispered. "Sarah, get out!" She screamed it this time, all the rage and hurt and 15 years of swallowed feelings erupting. "This is still my apartment too. My name is on the lease, and I want you to leave. Right now." "You can't be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life." Sarah's voice shook, but stayed steady. "I want a divorce, Mark. I'll file the papers next week. You can have the apartment, the furniture, whatever you want. I just want out." Mark stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. "You're really doing this over some fantasy with a billionaire?" "No." Sarah met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm doing this because I deserve to be seen, because I deserve a partner who knows my birthday and my favorite book and what makes me cry. Because I deserve more than compatible." Her voice broke. "Because after 15 years of being invisible, I finally want to be someone's first choice instead of their convenient option." She walked to the door, then paused. "The flowers you sent were beautiful, by the way. Roses. My favorite flowers are actually peonies. You'd know that if you'd ever asked." Sarah left the apartment, and with every step down the stairs, she felt lighter. The weight she'd been carrying for years, the guilt, the obligation, the martyrdom, fell away like a snake shedding its skin. Her marriage was over. Had been over for years, really. She'd just finally found the courage to admit it. Sarah's hands were still shaking when she walked into the Harrington Tower lobby. Thomas took one look at her face and immediately offered to call up to the penthouse. "That's okay," Sarah managed. "I have the key." In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smudged, but underneath the tears she looked different, stronger maybe, more solid. The penthouse was dark when she entered. Past 10 o'clock, James was probably in his study, working late as usual. Sarah headed straight for her suite, wanting nothing more than to collapse into bed and process everything that had just happened. But as she passed the study, she heard it. Piano music, not a recording this time, live playing, hesitant, halting, but undeniably beautiful. Sarah found herself drawn to the partially open door. Through the gap, she could see James at a baby grand piano she'd never noticed before. It must have been delivered while she was gone. He was still in his work clothes, tie loosened, playing something slow and melancholic. He was also crying. Sarah's breath caught. She'd never seen James show this kind of raw emotion. He always seemed so controlled, so composed. She should leave, give him privacy. This was clearly a private moment. Instead, she knocked gently on the door frame. James's hand stilled on the keys. He quickly wiped his eyes, but when he turned, she could still see the tears tracking down his face. "Sarah, you're back." He stood, attempting to compose himself. "I didn't hear you come in. I'll give you some space." "Don't." She stepped into the study. "Please. I could use the company." They stood looking at each other across the elegant room. Outside the windows, New York glittered like scattered diamonds. "Bad conversation with Mark?" James asked softly. "Marriage-ending conversation." Sarah's voice cracked. "I asked for a divorce." Something shifted in James's expression. Surprise, concern, and something else he quickly hid. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow." Sarah moved closer, drawn by the grand piano. "I didn't know you played." "I don't, not really. My mother tried to teach me when I was young, but I was terrible." James returned to the piano bench, running his fingers over the keys without pressing them. "This was hers. I had it in storage for years, had it delivered this afternoon." "Why now?" "Because I've been thinking about her lately, about choices she made, sacrifices." He played a single mournful note. "She stayed in a loveless marriage for 20 years because she thought it was the right thing to do, the responsible thing, and it killed her. Not literally, but the light went out of her eyes long before she died." Sarah sat beside him on the piano bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I'm sorry. I watched her disappear," James continued, his voice rough. "Year by year, she became smaller, quieter, less herself. And I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone I—" He stopped, looking at her with those grey eyes that saw too much. "When you talked about being invisible, all I could think about was my mother, how she faded until there was nothing left but obligations and routines. Is that why you offered me the job?" Sarah asked. "Because you saw your mother in me?" "No." James turned fully to face her. "I offered you the job because I saw you. Sarah Mitchell, who leaves thoughtful notes and arranges books by color and notices when someone is hurting. Not someone's wife or mother or employee. Just you." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. "I ended my marriage tonight," Sarah whispered, "and I should probably feel guilty or sad or something, but mostly I just feel relieved." "Is that terrible?" "It's honest." "James, I need to ask you something." She took a shaky breath. "That night in the kitchen, when you almost kissed me, did you mean it? Or were you just being kind to your pathetic, lonely housekeeper?" "Sarah, because I need to know. Before I make a complete fool of myself, I need to know if this is all in my head, if I'm imagining the way you look at me sometimes, the way you find excuses to spend time together, the way you—" James kissed her, not hesitant or questioning, full and sure and devastating in its intensity. His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone, and Sarah felt 15 years of loneliness shatter into nothing. She kissed him back, pouring everything into it, the pain and hope and terrifying possibility of starting over. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and she tangled her fingers in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "You're not imagining anything," he said roughly. "I've been falling for you since the first night I found you crying over my flaws, maybe before that. Maybe since the first note you left 3 years ago, when I didn't even know your face." "This is crazy," Sarah laughed, trembling. "I just ended my marriage hours ago. We worked together. There's a massive power imbalance. Every rational part of my brain is screaming that this is a terrible idea. What's the irrational part saying?" Sarah looked at this man who'd given her a job, a home, and most importantly, the courage to be seen. "That I've spent enough time being careful and practical and invisible, that maybe it's time to be reckless and impractical and gloriously, terrifyingly visible." James smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I can work with reckless and impractical." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Sarah felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to sunlight. This was probably a mistake. It was definitely complicated. There would be gossip and judgment and 1,000 practical concerns to navigate. But for the first time in 15 years, Sarah Mitchell was choosing herself, her happiness, her desire to be with someone who actually saw her, and God, did that feel good. They stayed in the study for hours, talking and kissing and talking some more. James told her about his failed marriage, how he and his ex-wife had been business partners who mistook compatibility for love. Sarah told him about the slow death of her own marriage, how invisibility had crept in one ignored moment at a time. "I don't want to rush this," James said eventually, playing with her fingers. "I don't want you to wake up tomorrow with regrets." "What if I don't want to be careful?" "Sarah, I've been careful my whole life, James. Careful got me 15 years of invisible. Maybe it's time to try something else. I'm still your employer. We still need to navigate. Then fire me." The words came out before Sarah could stop them, but once said, she didn't take them back. "Seriously, fire me. Pay me through the end of the month. Give me a reference and let me find another job. Then we're just two people who happen to like each other." James stared at her. "You'd give up this job, the salary, the apartment, all of it?" "In a heartbeat, if it means we can actually try this without the complication." Sarah squeezed his hands. "I don't need your money, James. I never did. I just needed someone who saw me. And you do. You see me." "I see you," he agreed softly, "and I'm not firing you. But I'm promoting you to, I don't know, Chief of Staff. Executive Assistant. We'll figure out the title. Point is, you'll have a real employment contract, official duties beyond housekeeping, and a salary that reflects your actual value to my household and my company." He grinned at her stunned expression. "I'm a businessman, Sarah. I know how to structure a deal that benefits everyone. You're insane." "I'm practical. There's a difference." He pulled her close again. "Besides, I've tasted your cooking. I'm not letting you go anywhere." Sarah laughed, really laughed, and buried her face in his shoulder. He smelled like cedar and coffee, and possibility. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now? Now you go to bed, get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll deal with lawyers and employment contracts and all the practical realities." James pulled back to look at her, his grey eyes warm. "But tonight, just know that you're seen, Sarah Mitchell, really, truly seen. By you. By me." Sarah kissed him one more time, tender, promising, full of tomorrow, then reluctantly retreated to her suite. She lay in bed for hours, too wired to sleep, her lips still tingling and her heart doing gymnastics in her chest. Her marriage was over. Her life as she'd known it was over. Everything familiar and safe had crumbled in the space of a few weeks, and somehow, impossibly, she'd never been happier. Through the wall, She heard the piano again. James playing that same melancholic melody. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like hope. The law offices of Sterling and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown, all polished mahogany and muted grey carpets. Sarah sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her first car, watching her new divorce attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, review documents with practiced efficiency. "This should be relatively straightforward," Patricia said, tapping her pen against the file. "No children under 18, minimal shared assets, and from what you've described, your husband isn't likely to contest. New York is a no-fault state, so we'll file on grounds of irretrievable breakdown. 6 months from filing to finalization, typically. 6 months." Sarah's stomach flipped. 6 months until she was officially unmarried. Free, unless he fights it, which would extend the timeline. But given that you're not asking for alimony or trying to claim any of his pension, and you're willing to let him keep the apartment, Patricia smiled slightly. "Most men don't fight when a divorce costs them nothing. I don't want his money. I just want out." That's refreshingly simple. Though I should mention, Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. "You're entitled to more. 15 years of marriage, you could make a case for spousal support, at least temporarily, especially given the disparity in your earnings during the marriage." "I don't need it. I have a good job now." Patricia's eyebrow arched. The live-in housekeeper position. With James Harrington, Sarah's cheeks heated. Of course, Patricia had done her homework. "Yes, he's been very good to me." "I'm sure he has." Patricia's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a question. "Sarah, I need to ask this, and please don't take offense. Are you romantically involved with Mr. Harrington?" The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats too long. There are feelings." "Yes." Sarah forced herself to meet Patricia's gaze. "But nothing happened while I was still living with Mark. I believe you. But the optics matter." Patricia set down her pen. "If your husband finds out you're involved with your employer, especially a billionaire employer, he could claim infidelity. He could argue you left the marriage for another man, which in New York technically doesn't affect the divorce settlement, but it could drag things out, make them uglier than they need to be. So what do I do? Keep it quiet, at least until the papers are filed and he's signed them. After that, once the legal separation is established, you can date whoever you want without it affecting the proceedings." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I know 6 months seems like a long time to keep a relationship under wraps, but trust me, it's better than giving him ammunition." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of reality settling on her shoulders. She and James had only kissed twice, once in the kitchen, once in the study, but already the thought of maintaining distance felt impossible. "One more thing," Patricia added, "the power dynamic between you and Mr. Harrington. You're his employee. If things go south, if he decides he's done with you, you could find yourself unemployed and homeless. I'd strongly advise you to have a backup plan. James would never—" "Maybe not. But I've been a divorce attorney for 20 years, Sarah. I've seen what happens when people assume the best about others. Protect yourself. That's all I'm saying." Sarah walked the 15 blocks back to Harrington Tower, Patricia's words echoing in her head. The spring afternoon was beautiful, cherry blossoms drifting like pink snow, street vendors selling flowers, the city humming with energy. But all Sarah could think about was the precariousness of her situation. She'd left one dependent relationship and walked straight into another. Yes, James was kinder than Mark. Yes, he actually saw her. But Patricia was right. He also employed her, housed her, and held all the power. What happened if this thing between them fell apart? If the novelty wore off and James realized Sarah was just his housekeeper, not some romantic fantasy? She'd be alone, divorced, middle-aged, starting over from nothing. The thought was terrifying. Sarah was so lost in her spiraling thoughts that she almost walked past the small art gallery tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore. But something in the window caught her eye. A painting. A woman standing at a window, backlit by city lights, her face turned away, but her posture suggesting both loneliness and hope. The colors were rich, deep blues and golds, and something about it grabbed Sarah by the throat. Before she could second-guess herself, she walked inside. The gallery was small but elegant, full of contemporary art that Sarah couldn't begin to afford. A young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings looked up from behind a desk. "Help you find something?" The painting in the window. The woman at the window? Who's the artist? That's from our new series by Marcus Webb. Amazing, right? He does this whole collection about urban isolation. That piece is called Visible. $12,000. Sarah's heart sank. Of course it was $12,000. "I can't afford that," she admitted. I really connected with it." The purple-haired woman smiled sympathetically. "I get it. That's the one everyone stops for. Marcus actually has some smaller prints available. Not the same as the original, but still beautiful. Those run about $200. $200. Sarah thought about her new salary, the money accumulating in her bank account for the first time in years. Money that was actually hers, not earmarked for bills or groceries or Mark's dry cleaning. "I'll take a print," she said before she could talk herself out of it. 20 minutes later, Sarah walked out of the gallery with a carefully wrapped package under her arm and a feeling of giddy rebellion in her chest. She'd just spent $200 on art, on something beautiful and impractical that served no purpose except making her happy. When was the last time she'd done something just for herself? James was in the kitchen when Sarah got home, attempting to make coffee and clearly struggling with the temperamental espresso machine. "You look happy," he observed, abandoning his battle with the machine. "Good meeting with the attorney?" "Straightforward but complicated." Sarah set down the wrapped print. "She says 6 months for the divorce to finalize. She also says we should keep this," she gestured between them, "quiet until Mark signs the papers." James's expression shuttered slightly. I'm not saying we stop. Just discreet. For a few months. Of course, that's sensible." But his tone suggested disappointment. Sarah moved closer, taking his hands. "James, I'm not having second thoughts. I'm just trying to do this the right way. So, Mark can't make things difficult. I understand. Really." He squeezed her hands. "It's just, I've spent 6 years being careful, maintaining appropriate distance, not letting anyone in. And now that I've finally found someone who makes me want to be reckless, I have to go back to being careful, only for a little while." 6 months isn't a little while, Sarah. We'll still be living in the same apartment, seeing each other every day. It's not like we're separating. No, just pretending we're only employer and employee when anyone's watching." James pulled away, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm sorry, that's not fair. You're right. We need to be smart about this." Sarah watched him pace, seeing the tension in his shoulders. This was harder for him than he was letting on. "What are you afraid of?" she asked softly. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "That you'll realize this was a mistake. That the novelty will wear off, and you'll see that I'm just a lonely workaholic who happened to offer you a good salary." "James, I'm 48 years old, Sarah. I've been divorced for 6 years, and in that entire time, I haven't had a single relationship that lasted more than 3 months. You know why?" His laugh was bitter. "Because I'm married to my company. Because I work 80-hour weeks and cancel plans and forget birthdays. Because I'm fundamentally selfish with my time and energy." "You're not selfish." "I am. I absolutely am. And you've been married to one workaholic who didn't see you. Why would you want another?" Sarah crossed the kitchen and grabbed his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Because you're nothing like Mark. Yes, you work too much. Yes, you're obsessive about your company, but you also notice when someone's hurting. You play piano at midnight because you're thinking about your mother. You tried to cook me dinner even though you have the culinary skills of a concussed raccoon. She smiled at his surprised laugh. You're not selfish, James. You're just scared, and that's okay. I'm scared too. Of what? That this is too good to be real, that I'm going to wake up and discover I imagined the whole thing. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, that I don't deserve to be this happy. James pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the kitchen while the espresso machine hissed quietly in the background. 6 months, he finally said. We can do 6 months of being discreet. And then I'm taking you to the most expensive restaurant in New York and announcing to everyone that you're mine. Sarah laughed against his chest. That's very caveman of you. I contain multitudes. They stayed wrapped together until James's phone buzzed with what was probably the 15th work emergency of the day. He groaned, but pulled away reluctantly. Conference call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. Rain check on this conversation. Only if you teach me to play piano later. Sarah, I can barely play myself. Then we'll be terrible together. After James disappeared into his study, Sarah unwrapped her print and stood looking at it for a long time. The woman at the window, caught between isolation and hope. 6 months ago, that had been Sarah. Invisible, lonely, trapped in a life that was slowly suffocating her. Now she was here, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, having just made plans to learn piano, with a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. It was terrifying. It was complicated. It was probably going to be messy. But God, it was real. Sarah hung the print in her bedroom, right where she could see it from the bed, a reminder of who she'd been and who she was becoming. Visible. Finally, gloriously visible. The next few weeks fell into a strange rhythm. During the day, Sarah and James maintained professional distance. Employer and employee, nothing more. She managed his household, organized his schedule, prepared his meals. He attended meetings, made deals, built his empire. But at night, after the sun set and the penthouse became their private world, the walls came down. They'd have dinner together, talking for hours about everything and nothing. James would try to teach Sarah piano, though they spent more time laughing at his mistakes than actually learning. She'd introduce him to her favorite movies, introducing him to romantic comedies he'd somehow never seen. Sometimes they'd kiss, carefully, knowing they had to stop before things went too far, and pull away, breathless and frustrated. 6 months is too long, James groaned one night after a particularly heated kiss on the couch. 5 months and 3 weeks now, Sarah corrected, equally frustrated, not helping. But they stuck to their boundaries, both understanding the importance of doing things right. Then, 3 weeks after Sarah filed for divorce, Mark showed up. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the call came from the lobby. Thomas, sounding apologetic. Miss Sarah, your husband is here. He's insisting on coming up. I can turn him away, but... No, it's fine. Send him up. Her heart hammered as she waited by the elevator. What was Mark doing here? He'd been served the papers a week ago. His attorney had contacted hers with no contest, no fight. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The elevator doors opened, and Mark stepped out, looking even worse than he had at their last meeting. Unshaven, rumpled suit, wild eyes. Sarah. He looked around the penthouse foyer with barely concealed contempt. Nice place. Really trading up, aren't you? Mark, what are you doing here? I signed your papers. Had them couriered over this morning. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Thought I'd deliver these personally. Our marriage certificate. Figured you'd want it for the file. Sarah took the envelope carefully, like it might explode. You could have mailed this. I could have, but I wanted to see for myself. Mark's gaze traveled past her, taking in the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows. Wanted to see what was so much better than our life together. Mark, please don't do this. Is he here? Your billionaire? He's working. I'm right here. Both of them turned. James stood in the hallway leading to his study, still in his work clothes, but with his jacket off and sleeves rolled up. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Harrington," Mark said with exaggerated politeness, "nice to finally meet the man who destroyed my marriage." "I didn't destroy anything," James replied evenly. "Your marriage was over long before Sarah started working for me." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, a billionaire swept in and stole my wife with promises of money and luxury." "Mark, stop!" Sarah stepped between them. "This isn't about James. This is about you and me, and the fact that we made each other miserable for years. We both know it. I wasn't miserable. Yes, you were. You were exhausted and stressed and buried in work because you couldn't stand being home." Sarah's voice softened. "And I was invisible because you needed me to be, because it was easier than actually building a real partnership." Mark's anger deflated slightly. "I loved you. Maybe, in your way. But love isn't enough if you don't actually see the person you're loving." She touched his arm gently. "Let me go, Mark. Please. Let us both go and find people who actually make us happy." For a moment, Mark just stood there, looking lost and older than his 43 years. Then he nodded slowly. "I hope he treats you better than I did," he said quietly. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." He walked back to the elevator without another word. Sarah watched him go, feeling a complicated mix of relief and sadness and closure. When the elevator doors closed, she turned to find James watching her with concern. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think I am." Sarah moved into his arms, letting him hold her. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved? That I'm not sad? It means you grieved the marriage a long time ago. This is just the paperwork catching up." They stood holding each other for a long moment. Then James pulled back slightly, his expression serious. "Sarah, I need you to know something. I'm not Mark. I'm not perfect. God knows I have my own issues. But I see you. I will always see you. Even when we're fighting or tired or annoyed with each other, I'll see you. I know. And if you ever feel invisible with me, I need you to tell me. Immediately. Because that's my worst fear. Becoming the thing you left." Sarah kissed him, pouring everything into it. "You could never be Mark. You're too stubborn and work-obsessed and terrible at cooking. Those are my good qualities. Among others." She smiled against his lips. "Now, did you finish that conference call? Because I made your favorite salmon and I'm not letting it get cold." "Conference call can wait. Let's eat." As they settled in for dinner, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The last tie to her old life had been severed. Mark had signed the papers, delivered the marriage certificate, and walked away. 5 more months, and she'd be officially free. 5 more months, and she and James could stop pretending to be just employer and employee. 5 more months until her new life could really begin. It felt like both forever and no time at all. But as Sarah watched James attempt to open a wine bottle, struggling because he refused to admit he needed reading glasses, she realized something important. She wasn't waiting for her new life to start. It already had. The final chapter of Sarah Mitchell's old life ended on a Tuesday morning in October in a courthouse in Lower Manhattan. She stood in a hallway that smelled of floor polish and stale coffee, wearing a navy dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion. Not black. She wasn't mourning. Not celebratory colors either. Just simple, dignified navy. Patricia Chen stood beside her, briefcase in hand, looking professionally confident. "He's late." "Mark's always late." Sarah checked her phone. 10:43. The hearing was scheduled for 11. "If he doesn't show, we can still proceed. You can get a default judgment." "He'll show." And sure enough, at 10:57, Mark appeared at the end of the hallway, his attorney, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, trailing behind him. Mark looked better than he had 6 months ago. Clean-shaven, pressed suit, less haunted around the eyes. He'd even gotten a haircut. "Sarah," he said when he reached her, not hostile, not warm, just acknowledging. "Mark." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. 6 months of lawyers and paperwork and negotiated settlements had reduced 15 years of marriage to this. Two strangers in a courthouse hallway, waiting to sign papers that would untangle their lives. "You look good," Mark offered finally. "So do you. I've been seeing someone, a therapist. Turns out I had some things to work on." He laughed, but it sounded genuine rather than bitter. "Shocker, right? I'm glad. Are you happy?" The question was quiet, almost vulnerable. With him. Sarah thought about James, currently in London on business, but texting her hourly updates and terrible British puns, about the life they'd built over the past 6 months, carefully discreet but undeniably real. About waking up knowing someone actually saw her, valued her, wanted her. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm happy." Mark nodded. "Good. That's good." The bailiff called them into the courtroom. The actual proceedings took less than 15 minutes. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the settlement, asked if both parties agreed to the terms, and signed the decree. Just like that, Sarah Mitchell was no longer married. She walked out of the courthouse a free woman, divorced and 42, and standing on the threshold of something terrifying and wonderful. Patricia shook her hand. "Congratulations, you're officially done. Thank you for everything. My advice, take some time before jumping into anything too serious with Mr. Harrington. 6 months is a short rebound period. Patricia, I appreciate the concern, but I'm good, really." Sarah smiled. "I know what I want." After Patricia left, Sarah stood on the courthouse steps, letting the crisp October air wash over her. Tourists hurried past, unaware that the woman in the navy dress had just legally ended 15 years of her life. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. "How did it go?" Sarah smiled and typed back, "I'm free." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Dinner tonight? Somewhere expensive and public where I can tell everyone you're mine? Thought you'd never ask. 8 o'clock. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Define powerful. Something that makes me forget I'm supposed to be a professional billionaire and not a caveman who wants to throw you over his shoulder." Sarah laughed out loud, earning strange looks from passing lawyers. "I'll see what I can do." The dress was red. Not timid red, not subtle red. Bold, unapologetic, look-at-me red. It had a fitted bodice, a skirt that swirled when she walked, and a neckline that suggested rather than revealed. Emma had helped her pick it out during a shopping trip 2 weeks ago, declaring, "Mum, you're about to be officially single and dating a billionaire. You need a dress that says, 'I'm a goddamn catch.'" Standing in front of her bedroom mirror now, Sarah had to admit, the dress delivered. She'd also gotten her hair done that afternoon, subtle highlights that caught the light, styled in soft waves instead of her usual practical ponytail, professional makeup that emphasized her eyes. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah Mitchell looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone powerful, beautiful, worth seeing. The intercom buzzed. "Miss Sarah, your car is here." Her car. James had insisted on sending his driver, despite Sarah's protests that she could take a taxi. "Let me do this," he'd said. "Let me spoil you a little. You deserve to be spoiled." The driver, Marcus, who always had NPR playing softly and never asked intrusive questions, held the door open for her with an approving smile. "Looking lovely tonight, Miss Sarah." "Thank you, Marcus." The restaurant was Le Bernardin, a Michelin 3-star establishment in Midtown, where reservations required selling your firstborn. Sarah had cleaned apartments for people who couldn't get reservations here. James was waiting in the lobby, and the look on his face when he saw her made Sarah's heart stutter. He was in a dark suit, perfectly tailored, probably custom, but he'd lost the tie somewhere and undone the top 2 buttons of his shirt. His silver-streaked hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Sarah," her name came out almost reverent. "You look powerful, devastating." He crossed to her in 3 long strides, taking her hands. "Absolutely devastating. I'm going to have to fight off every man in this restaurant." I think I can handle the fighting off part myself. My fierce woman. He kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Ready to go public? I've been ready for 6 months. The maitre d' led them to a corner table with a view of the city lights. Sarah recognized at least 3 famous faces in the dining room. A movie star, a politician, someone who might have been a Kennedy. This was James's world. A world of wealth and influence, and people who summered in the Hamptons. For a moment, doubt crept in. What was she doing here? She was a housekeeper. A divorced housekeeper who'd barely finished community college. Then James reached across the table and took her hand, rubbing his thumb across her knuckles. "You're thinking too loud again," he said softly, "just wondering if I belong here." "Sarah, you belong anywhere you choose to be, but if it helps," he gestured around the restaurant with his free hand. "Most of these people are profoundly boring. They inherited their money or married into it, and they spend their lives desperately trying to look important. You actually earned your place. You're real, and that's infinitely more valuable than old money and a summer house." "You have a summer house?" "2, actually. But I also built my first company in a garage with $12,000 and a laptop. I'm allowed." He grinned. "Besides, one of those summer houses could be yours too if you wanted. I'm great at sharing." Sarah laughed, feeling the tension drain away. This was James, who burned grilled cheese and played melancholic piano at midnight, and looked at her like she was the most important person in any room. Money didn't matter. Status didn't matter. This, the way he saw her, the way she saw him, that mattered. The sommelier appeared with a wine list the size of a small novel. James ordered in flawless French, then turned back to Sarah with a sheepish expression. "Sorry, was that obnoxious? The French thing?" "Little bit. My ex-wife insisted I learn. Said it was embarrassing when I couldn't order wine properly." He made a face. "She was very concerned about appearances. I'm not your ex-wife. Thank God for that." James raised his water glass. "To new beginnings?" "To being visible," Sarah countered, clinking her glass against his. Throughout dinner, which was exquisite, each course a masterpiece, they talked about everything. James's upcoming trip to Singapore, Sarah's plan to take some business courses at NYU, Emma's new boyfriend, who James had yet to meet but was already suspicious of. "I'm not suspicious," James protested. "I'm appropriately concerned. She's 19, and you've never even met him." "Exactly. He could be terrible, irresponsible, not good enough for her. You sound like a dad." "I'm practicing for when I eventually meet her and need to do the intimidating billionaire routine." He speared a piece of fish. "I'll have my security team run a background check." "James!" "What? I'm kidding. Mostly." At her expression, he relented. "Fine, no background check, but I reserve the right to judge him harshly based on his handshake." Sarah was laughing when she noticed the whispers starting at nearby tables, people glancing over, leaning into their companions, pulling out phones. "We're being photographed," she said quietly. James didn't even look around. "Probably. I'm a public figure. You're a beautiful woman having dinner with me. People talk. What will they say? That James Harrington is dating his housekeeper, that I'm having a midlife crisis, that you're a gold digger." He said it matter-of-factly, without heat. "People will say all kinds of things. The question is, do you care?" Sarah thought about it. 6 months ago, she would have cared desperately. Would have been mortified at the idea of people gossiping about her. But now, no, she realized, I don't care. Let them talk. That's my girl. After dinner, James suggested a walk through Central Park, despite the late hour. Marcus followed at a discreet distance in the car while they strolled through lamplight-dappled paths, holding hands like teenagers. "I have something for you," James said when they reached Bethesda Fountain. "Close your eyes." "James, if this is a dramatic jewelry moment, I'm going to be very uncomfortable." "It's not jewelry. Just close your eyes." Sarah obeyed, feeling simultaneously ridiculous and charmed. She heard rustling, then James's voice. "Okay, open." He was holding a key. Just a simple brass key, nothing fancy. It's the key to the penthouse, he explained. Your own key, not the staff key Mrs. Chen gave you, not a temporary key. Your key to your home. Sarah's throat tightened. James, I know you technically already live there, but this felt important. Symbolic. He pressed the key into her palm, closing her fingers around it. I want you to know that this is your home, Sarah. For as long as you want it, whether we're together or not, whether you're working for me or not, that's your home. You'll never be without a place again. You can't just give me a multi-million-dollar apartment. I'm not giving you the apartment. I'm giving you a home. There's a difference. His grey eyes were serious in the lamplight. You spent 15 years feeling rootless and invisible. I want you to have roots, to have a place that's unquestionably yours. Sarah looked at the key, feeling tears prick her eyes. This wasn't about money or real estate. This was about safety, about belonging, about James understanding exactly what she needed most. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for letting me see you. They kissed under the Bethesda fountain while tourists took pictures, and Marcus waited patiently in the car, and the city hummed around them. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah laughed. We're definitely going to be in the tabloids tomorrow. Probably. Want to give them something really scandalous? What did you have in mind? James got down on one knee. Sarah's heart stopped. James, what are you... Relax, I'm not proposing. You just got divorced this morning. I'm not that crazy. He pulled something else from his pocket, a small velvet box. But I'm asking you something important. He opened the box to reveal a beautiful vintage compass, brass and glass, the kind that belonged in an antique shop or a museum. This was my mother's, James said. My father gave it to her when they first got married. He told her it would always point her home, no matter how lost she felt. His voice roughened. She gave it to me before she died. Made me promise I'd give it to someone who understood what it meant to be lost, to someone who was brave enough to find their way home. James, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Not until you're absolutely sure. He looked up at her, still kneeling beside the fountain. But I'm asking you to be my partner, my real partner. Not my employee, not my housekeeper, my equal, someone who challenges me and calls me out and makes me want to be better than I am. Sarah pulled him to his feet, the compass clutched in her hand. Yes. Yes? Yes to being your partner. Yes to challenging you. Yes to all of it. She kissed him, hard and sure. But if you ever get down on one knee in public again without actually proposing, I'm going to make you learn to cook more than grilled cheese. James laughed, picking her up and spinning her around while she shrieked. Deal, though I should warn you, my cooking hasn't improved. I know. I've lived with you for 8 months. Your scrambled eggs are a crime against breakfast, and yet you love me anyway. The words hung in the air between them. They'd been dancing around them for months, both too scared to say it first. Yes, Sarah said firmly, I love you anyway. Despite your terrible cooking and your workaholic tendencies and your habit of playing sad piano at 2 a.m, I love you too. James set her down, cradling her face in his hands. I love your strength and your kindness, and the way you reorganize my books when you think I'm not looking. I love that you left me notes for 3 years before I ever knew your face. I love that you chose to be visible. They kissed again, and somewhere in the distance a phone camera clicked. Tomorrow they'd be in page 6 in the Daily Mail and probably several gossip blogs. But tonight they were just 2 people who'd found each other in the unlikeliest of ways. A housekeeper who'd been invisible for 15 years and a billionaire who'd been lonely for 6. 2 people who'd learned that being seen, really seen, was worth any risk. 3 months later, Sarah stood in her old apartment in Queens one last time. Emma was helping her pack the few remaining items, photo albums, some kitchen gadgets, a ratty armchair that held sentimental value. You really don't have to take this chair, Mom, Emma said, eyeing the threadbare monstrosity. James probably has a spare chair worth more than this building. It was your grandmother's chair. I'm not leaving it. Fair enough. Ratty, sentimental chair it is. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Mark had already moved out, relocated to a smaller place in Brooklyn with his new girlfriend, a nurse he'd met in therapy. The apartment would go to a young couple with a baby on the way, starting their own story in these cramped rooms. "Are you happy, Mum?" Emma asked suddenly. "Really happy?" Sarah thought about her life now. The penthouse that felt like home. The job that had evolved into actually managing James's household staff and calendar, a real position with real responsibilities. The NYU business courses she was taking. The man who looked at her every morning like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Yes," she said, "I'm really happy. Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Good. You deserve it." Emma hugged her tightly. "Though I still need to meet this boyfriend of yours properly. Dinner doesn't count if he's asking me about my GPA the whole time. He's nervous. He wants you to like him." "I'll like him as long as he keeps treating you right. The second he doesn't..." Emma made a throat-slitting gesture. Very subtle. "I learned from the best." They finished packing as the sun set over Queens, painting the cramped apartment in shades of gold. Sarah took one last look around the place that had been her home for 15 years. She'd been invisible here, a ghost moving through her own life, never again. Sarah locked the door for the last time and handed the keys to the building manager, feeling nothing but relief and gratitude. Relief that this chapter was over. Gratitude for everything it had taught her. The penthouse was warm when Sarah got home, smelling of something that was either dinner or a fire hazard. She found James in the kitchen, covered in flour, looking at a cookbook with intense concentration. "What are you doing?" "Cooking. Or attempting to. I'm making pasta from scratch because apparently that's a thing people do." He gestured helplessly at the disaster zone around him. "I've created some kind of dough monster. It's alive. I'm pretty sure it's planning an attack." Sarah laughed, setting down her boxes and crossing to him. "You have flour in your hair. I have flour everywhere. I'm a flour-based life form now." She kissed him, tasting flour and laughter and home. "I love you, even when I'm a cooking disaster." "Especially when you're a cooking disaster." James abandoned his dough monster to pull her close. "How was the apartment?" "Fine. Good." Closed that chapter. Any regrets? Not even one. They stood in the kitchen, their kitchen, while the city sparkled outside and the dough monster plotted its revenge, and the future stretched ahead full of possibility. Sarah Mitchell had spent 42 years learning to be invisible, learning to make herself smaller, quieter, more convenient for everyone else. But now, wrapped in James Harrington's arms with flour in both their hair and dinner burning on the stove, she was learning something better. She was learning to be seen, to take up space, to be unapologetically, gloriously, messily herself. And it was the best thing she'd ever learned. "Come on," James said, pulling away reluctantly. "Help me salvage this pasta disaster before we have to order takeout again. What's in it for me? My eternal gratitude, a glass of very expensive wine, the knowledge that you prevented a kitchen fire. Throw in piano lessons and you've got a deal. Still terrible at piano. I know, we'll be terrible together." And as they worked side by side, attempting to rescue James's culinary disaster, Sarah caught their reflection in the darkened window. Two people, flour-covered and laughing, building something real together. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but visible. Finally, wonderfully visible. And that was everything.